The March wind of 1943 whipped fiercely through the narrow Norwegian fjords, cutting between jagged cliffs that loomed like ancient sentinels, their dark faces reflecting the faint silver glow of a dim moon. U-601 glided silently across the ink-black water metal hull, creaking softly under the pressure of ice. Crew members huddled in woolen coats, eyes straining to pierce the fog, catching shadows that twisted and danced just beyond sight. The air carried the sharp scent of salt and steel, but beneath it lingered something older, something ancient, almost conscious. Whispers drifted on the wind, names carried from unseen mouths, echoing unnaturally between cliffs both human and not. Mist thickened and twisted around the vessel, curling over the deck and rigging like living smoke. Every shadow was a question, every rustle a test fear both guide and predator. Legends spoke of guardians older than memory, invisible watchers of the fjords, spirits of long-dead Vikings who claimed trespassers with silent fury. Sailors whispered stories of ships that vanished without a trace, instruments failing. Lights flickering, crew gripped by cold dread. A silhouette flickered along the cliff face, rising and falling, impossibly defying scale and logic, sending shivers through the men. The logbook trembled under icy hands, fate unknown. Singular disappearance. Voices beyond comprehension. Fog wrapped the vessel in its unrelenting embrace, every reflection and shadow twisting perception. The fjord pulsed with unseen life, patient, deliberate observing. The night seemed alive, waiting, always waiting. Ice clung to every rail and gun barrel, glinting under the moonlight, like frozen warnings. Waves lapped with unnatural rhythm, reflections dancing across the surface into impossible shapes. Crew members froze, every heartbeat echoing through the hull, every breath stolen by anticipation. The wind carried distant, indistinct sounds, drums, voices, maybe machinery untraceable yet threatening. Mist rolled along the cliffs and over the water, shapes forming and dissolving with every step, every glance. Shadows stretched impossibly long, rising like fingers from the darkness. The captain barked orders, but the vessel ignored charts, currents, reason. The fjord was no longer a place, but an entity. Watching, measuring, judging. A faint glow pulsed beneath the water, rhythmical like a heartbeat, not meant for human comprehension. Crew leaned over the rails, frozen by the unnatural sight, unable to tear their eyes away. Shapes swirled below, some vaguely humanoid, others abstract and alien, twisting against logic and expectation. Whispers thickened into syllables, calling warning, observing. Frost clung to hair and uniform, crystallizing instantly in the freezing air. Lanterns flickered and died, leaving only moonlight and the fjord's oppressive presence. Reflections in ice and water danced, mocking the crew's senses, bending reality. Every creak, groan, and splash felt magnified, echoing with intent. Currents shifted subtly beneath the hull, tugging the ship, as if guided by unseen hands. Shadows moved across the cliffs in impossible ways, stretching, curling, forming grotesque faces and hands. Crew reported flashes of movement under the water, too fast, too fluid for fish or debris. Every sound amplified every flicker of motion, suspicious nerves taut with anticipation. The fjord tested patience, endurance, understanding. Instruments remained dead, charts useless. Sailors felt the eyes of the fjord upon them, heavy, patient, eternal. The first true sense of terror settled, binding them to a reality far stranger than legend. Moonlight dipped behind clouds, plunging the fjord into near-complete darkness. Shapes shimmered and dissolved in mist, fleeting yet unmistakable. Whispers spiraled from corners unseen, curling into minds with warnings, promises, and questions. Lanterns extinguished completely, leaving only cold, silver light and the haunting presence of shadows. Every step, every breath, every glance carried risk, amplified by fog and reflection. Crew whispered old tales aloud, invoking names and legends to anchor themselves. Yet the fjord refused logic-bending perception memory and fear into a living, incomprehensible whole. The vessel floated suspended between worlds, neither fully in this one nor the next. The wind shifted, carrying impossible scents of frost decay and salt penetrating clothes, skin, and mind. Faint lights shimmered beneath the waves, pulsing in sync with an unknown rhythm. Crew reported sensations of being touched by unseen hands brushing against them in the fog. The fjord's guardians, once myth, became palpable, present, tangible in the marrow of their bones. Shadows rose, folded, twisted along the deck cliffs, and water mocking human perception. Instruments failed completely, charts meaningless. Every movement dictated by unseen influence. The men realized that the fjord had claimed them not as trespassers, but as part of its story. The mist thickened further, curling around masts, deck, and hull like a living shroud. Whispers escalated to near-sentient voices, impossible to localize, yet impossible to ignore. Shapes below the water shifted and pulsed, sometimes humanoid, sometimes abstract, always threatening. Crew clutched each other, instinctive proximity, providing little comfort. The fjord seemed to guide, mock, and observe with deliberate patience. Ice and frost glinted unnaturally, reflections forming impossible eyes. The vessel floated, trapped between reality and nightmare, caught in the fjord's ancient, relentless watch. Sailors understood they were no longer merely observers. They were participants, prey, and story. The fjord had long been considered a natural fortress, its labyrinthine channels and towering cliffs forming an almost impenetrable barrier against both man and machine. German engineers had mapped the area extensively, but even their detailed charts could not account for sudden shifts in wind current or mist that seemed to appear at will. Patrols reported equipment malfunctioning at precise moments, compasses spinning wildly as if the landscape itself resisted measurement. Vessels navigated cautiously, hulls creaking against invisible pressure, every sonar ping returning echoes where no rock or ship existed. Onshore, small settlements watched silently, villagers moving like shadows through snow-laden paths. Their stories spoke of lights reflecting off the water that could not be traced. Shapes moving along the cliffs that defied physical possibility. And in the nights when patrols were most active, a chilling stillness fell over the fjord, as if the land and water were holding their breath, waiting for something to be revealed. Local historians and naval officers alike noted that the fjord had a reputation older than the current conflict. Ancient ruins, partly submerged in icy water, suggested long-forgotten settlements and fortifications, some dating back centuries. Fishermen occasionally recovered artifacts that should have been unreachable: rusted spears, fragments of armor, and broken tools. Each discovery was catalogued, yet none explained the persistence of strange occurrences. Whispered tales told of figures moving silently through the cliffs at dawn, their shapes indistinct yet unmistakably human. Survivors described hearing commands in languages they did not recognize, voices carried across the water, despite the absence of any source. These accounts blurred the line between fact and folklore, between the tangible and the inexplicable. German officers reported that even routine patrols became exercises in caution and superstition. Crews noted areas where radar consistently failed, sonar picked up multiple false echoes, and instruments reported changes in magnetic fields. Men spoke of hearing footsteps above deck when no one was present, of objects shifting as if guided by unseen hands. Some maintained that the fjord itself seemed to anticipate their movements, currents pushing ships subtly toward hazards, mist obscuring channels just long enough to force navigation errors. The combination of physical danger and unexplainable phenomena turned each mission into both a tactical challenge and a psychological trial. Every patrol returned with journals full of unexplained observations recorded meticulously to maintain credibility. The surrounding forests added another layer of mystery. Trees grew in patterns that suggested unnatural interference routes, curling over rock and soil in ways that seemed deliberate. Hunters reported hearing distant laughter or voices calling their names, yet when they investigated, the sounds vanished. Tracks appeared and disappeared in the snow, sometimes leading deeper into the forest, sometimes circling back impossibly. Wildlife behaved erratically, fleeing from something unseen or appearing where none should be. The combination of natural treachery and unaccountable phenomena reinforced the sense that the fjord and forest acted together, a single entity testing all who entered. Throughout the region, villagers told stories of past events eerily similar to the current patrol anomalies. Ships disappearing without warning. Hunters vanishing into the mist, lights moving against wind and gravity. Some believed the fjord was haunted by spirits of fallen warriors, ancient defenders, who punished intrusion with cryptic trials. Others suggested more practical explanations, magnetic anomalies, extreme weather, and optical illusions, but no single theory accounted for all occurrences. The convergence of folklore and repeated observation created a narrative where every event was simultaneously grounded and impossible. Each patrol added to the tapestry, weaving human experience with the unexplained. Even the wildlife seemed to reflect the strangeness of the place. Eagles circled endlessly above narrow channels, their cries echoing unnaturally, while deer and wolves appeared to vanish in mid-step. Crew members reported moments when fish leapt from the water in patterns resembling warning signs. Every rustle of leaves, every ripple of water, seemed laden with intent. Observers felt eyes upon them even when no movement could be discerned. The psychological weight of this constant surveillance compounded the physical hazards, leaving men unnerved and alert. Survival depended on observation, intuition, and strict adherence to protocol, yet instinct alone was insufficient. Naval records described recurring patterns during patrols. Certain inlets seemed more active, with repeated reports of strange lights, vanishing objects, and anomalous readings. Time and again, vessels reported being drawn toward hazards despite best efforts to avoid them. Officers hypothesized localized magnetic disturbances, underwater currents, or optical refraction, but explanations were inadequate. Each anomaly corresponded to a location steeped in local lore. Forgotten coves, old shipwrecks, and ancient cliffside settlements. The boundary between practical hazard and supernatural presence blurred, creating a climate where both scientific and mystical explanations held weight. The strategic importance of the fjord was undeniable. Control over these channels allowed for movement of supplies, reconnaissance, and defense. Yet the repeated anomalies forced commanders to implement new procedures. Patrols adjusted routes, timing, and personnel to minimize risk. Night operations were particularly fraught. Even experienced sailors hesitated to proceed after sundown. Lessons learned combined rigorous planning with an almost ritual respect for the unknown. The fjord dictated terms subtly through nature, legend, and anomaly. And the longer the patrols persisted, the more the stories accumulated, reinforcing caution and awe. Even local folklore reflected the tangible experiences of patrols. Tales spoke of shadowed guardians, invisible watchers who enforced order and punished recklessness. Hunters and sailors recounted objects moving mysteriously, paths shifting unpredictably, lights flashing in patterns that seemed deliberate. Some believed these were spirits, some hypothesized optical or magnetic phenomena. Yet every observation, however practical, was filtered through fear and awareness. The fjord and forest had taught patience, endurance, and respect. No man could ignore its lessons without consequence. Despite repeated patrols and careful observation, incidents continued. Equipment vanished, lights flickered, and shadows moved in ways that defied explanation. Logbooks recorded sensations of being watched, instruments behaving erratically, and fleeting glimpses of humanoid forms. Even those skeptical of folklore admitted unease. The combination of documented anomalies and pervasive legends created a space where rationality and superstition coexisted. Every crew member became acutely aware that survival depended not just on skill, but on humility before the fjord. The landscape itself seemed to participate. Cliffs echoed sounds unpredictably, water pooled in unnatural formations, and mist thickened in ways that altered perception. Crews described moments where the terrain seemed to guide or mislead them. Patterns emerged over time, but their origin remained obscure. Navigating the fjord became a negotiation with forces beyond human comprehension. Every patrol contributed new experiences, each one woven into the collective memory of the fjord. History, legend, and personal testimony intertwined, creating a living narrative. By midwinter, the fjord had earned a reputation even among German commanders. Patrols approached with caution, respecting the physical dangers and the unexplained. Local lore provided context and warning, blending seamlessly with operational reports. The fjord's environment, watercliffs, forest mist, acted as both obstacle and teacher. Every observation, from anomalous lights to vanished objects, reinforced the sense of sentience within the landscape. Men learned to read the fjord not just as terrain, but as a narrative, a set of rules older than memory encoded in rocks, water, and fog. Lessons endured beyond any single patrol. Finally, the fjord stood as a dual entity, at once battlefield and enigma, site of strategic operations and locus of unexplainable phenomena. Ships moved cautiously, sailors observed vigilantly, yet the land and water held secrets beyond comprehension. Reports and folklore blended, creating a framework where history and myth were inseparable. The patrols learned humility, and the fjord continued its patient, eternal watch. Every vessel, every crew, every whisper added to a narrative that would endure long after individual men were gone. The landscape itself was alive, and it remembered everything. The logbooks of U-601 described the frozen fjord in meticulous detail, noting currents that shifted unpredictably, sonar readings that returned echoes of unknown origin, instruments failing at critical moments, the hull creaking under pressures that seemed disproportionate to the ship's movement. Crew members recorded fleeting shadows on cliffs, sometimes humanoid, sometimes distorted. Lights appearing beneath water, moving independently of tides and currents. Observers noted fog pockets so dense they obscured vision completely. Temperatures fluctuating without meteorological explanation. Whispers carried on the wind with no identifiable source. Fear and vigilance became constant companions. Reports from earlier patrols recounted convoys misled by invisible forces. Ships drawn off course by currents that shifted within minutes. Officers noting simultaneous instrument malfunctions in narrow channels. Silhouettes observed atop cliffs vanished before identification. Lights beneath water glowed with untraceable intensity. Navigational charts proved unreliable compasses spinning erratically. Crew tested theories of magnetic anomalies, mirages, or reflections. Yet patterns persisted. Objects disappeared on deck and reappeared in impossible locations, each anomaly meticulously logged for analysis. Historic comparisons revealed patterns repeating across decades. Fishermen's diaries from the early 1900s described vessels lost to sudden fog shadows, moving along cliffs, unexplained lights. Even in peacetime, travelers vanished or returned disoriented. Local legends spoke of guardians patrolling the fjord, punishing the unwary. Anthropologists noted these stories persisted for centuries, remarkably consistent in detail. Oral histories described figures appearing in mist, guiding or threatening, depending on behavior. Crew journals corroborated some descriptions of lights, sounds, and shifting shapes. The combination of evidence suggested a persistent phenomenon, stretching beyond a single generation or patrol. The fjord's physical geography amplified its mystique. Narrow channels that funneled wind and sound unpredictably, cliffs reflecting and distorting visual cues, water currents that defied models and maps, pockets of fog appearing suddenly and lingering inexplicably, ice forming obstacles in otherwise clear passages. Sailors reported hearing footsteps above deck with no one present, echoes carried in impossible ways, shapes glinting in reflections that could not exist naturally. Environmental hazards combined with anomalies challenged perception and decision-making. Survival depended on both skill and intuition. Crew journals described the psychological impact of these anomalies. Sleep deprivation, hypervigilance, adrenaline spikes during unusual sightings, men hearing names called in unknown voices, whispers in the dead of night that seemed intelligible yet alien, instruments recording vibrations and static with no physical source, hallucinations or shared experiences reported by multiple crew, officers recording observations cautiously balancing credibility with necessity. Fear became tangible, tactile, a layer upon the icy deck itself. Observation became obsession. Artifacts recovered from previous wrecks added factual weight to the reports. Fragments of hulls in impossible locations. Tools found miles from reported losses. Some recovered items rearranged as if by unseen hands. Old maps marking forgotten coves, sunken vessels, or cliffside ruins. Survey teams corroborated anomalies in topography. Tidal measurements inconsistent with historical data. Repeated disappearance patterns matched folklore accounts. Observations cross-checked over years suggested systemic, unexplainable forces. Each artifact became a node in a complex network of fact and speculation. Naval logs recorded repeated patterns during night patrols. Sudden light displays beneath water often moving rhythmically. Shadows appearing and disappearing atop cliffs. Sonar pings generating echoes from no identifiable object. Crew felt the fjord observing, reacting, testing skill and resolve. Navigation became a negotiation with the terrain and its anomalies. Officers documented minor adjustments required repeatedly to counter inexplicable shifts. Repeated occurrences fostered protocol adaptations. Superstition merged with procedure. Caution became ritual. The forests bordering the fjord contributed to anomalous observations. Trees bent in unnatural ways. Roots forming shapes resembling hands or arches. Hunters reported footsteps following paths with no visible cause. Snow patterns appeared rearranged deliberately. Animals behaving erratically. Wolves vanishing, eagles circling without pattern. Human senses strained to distinguish natural from impossible. Ambient sounds amplified in the still air. Perception constantly challenged by environment. Survival demanded reverence for both known and unknown forces. Multiple patrols reported temporal irregularities. Crew members momentarily disappearing from sight only to reappear minutes later. Instruments recorded static or shifts coinciding with these events. Visual anomalies frequently accompanied these lapses. Documentation, cross-referenced, confirmed consistency in timing and location. Psychological effects intensified with repeated exposure. Decision-making affected by heightened fear and disorientation. Logs noted increased fatigue, hyper-awareness, and anxiety. These patterns became part of the official record, reinforcing the reality of unexplainable phenomena. Microclimates within the fjord created additional challenges. Sudden fog pockets, unexpected gusts, temperature inversions. Areas where magnetic and electrical anomalies interfered with instruments. Ice formations appearing suddenly and obstructing channels. Navigational challenges compounded by sensory distortions. Reflections created false images of cliffs, water, and vessels, Repeated anomalies noted in similar geographic locations. Historical patterns indicated long-term persistence. The fjord's environment was an active factor in both navigation and observation, influencing human behavior consistently. Crew observations included impossible interactions between environmental and anomalous phenomena, icebergs shifting unpredictably, currents reversing briefly, reflections producing multiple contradictory images, objects rearranged or disappearing temporarily, synchronized with lights and shadows observed elsewhere in the fjord, patterns too consistent to be random, evidence catalogued meticulously, forming a layered record of facts, anomalies, and human responses, bridging natural observation with phenomena beyond conventional understanding. Repeated sightings were corroborated across patrols, lights beneath water shapes moving independently of currents, figures on cliffs disappearing upon approach, unusual acoustic patterns noted consistently, anomalies not limited to human observation. Instruments recorded signals impossible to reconcile with known physics. Material evidence corroborated reported events. Recovered objects inconsistent with currents or tides. Every anomaly carefully logged, combining quantitative data with qualitative accounts. Observers noted interactions between humans and the environment producing unexplainable phenomena. Repeated experiences across different patrols suggested systemic influence. Crew behavior altered by repeated exposure to lights, shadows, and instruments malfunctioning. Tactical decisions adjusted to accommodate anomalies. Fear and observation intertwined. The fjord's influence felt in body and mind. Environmental and anomalous factors interacted, shaping strategy, navigation, and perception. Officers respected patterns emerging over time. By midwinter, the fjord had established its reputation among military and local communities. Repeated anomalies documented, corroborated, and impossible to ignore. Patrols approached with caution. Even small convoys adapted routes to account for unexplainable currents, lights, and shifting shadows. Local folklore and operational experience merged. Vessels adapted to terrain, as if negotiating with a sentient presence. Reports continued, layered with fact and legend. The fjord remained active, testing patience, skill, and observation. Patterns persistent, enduring, and chilling. Vigilance became the only constant. Finally, all data and observations formed a comprehensive fact layer. Environmental anomalies, material artifacts, instrument failures, crew testimonies, cross-referenced against historical accounts, folklore, and prior patrols. Consistency across decades suggested more than coincidence. The fjord operated as both obstacle and teacher. Each patrol contributed to the body of knowledge, integrating fact and experience. Reality intertwined with legend. Observation became survival. Survival became narrative. The fjord waited, eternal, patient, and incomprehensible. Each vessel and crew a chapter in its ongoing story. The fjords were said to be alive long before the war. Locals whispered that shadows moved with purpose, unseen yet observant. That night, tales of ancient guardians resurfaced. Spirits of Vikings who once patrolled these waters in life, now lingering in death. Their presence was subtle, felt in the shiver of a sudden breeze, in the way mist clung unnaturally to cliffs. Hunters spoke of lights hovering where no vessel had passed, shapes appearing just beyond reach. Names were carried on the wind, sometimes familiar, sometimes alien. These stories had endured generations, repeated in hushed tones by villagers who knew the fjord could claim the unwary. Fishermen told of spectral ships that glided silently beneath the moonlight. Hulls intact, sails motionless yet moving with eerie precision. Crewmen reported glimpses of these phantoms, their forms flickering in and out of perception. Lights appeared along their decks, as though lanterns burned without flame. Whispers rose from the water, echoing in languages no sailor had ever heard. Some claimed to see figures on the cliffs cloaked in shadow, observing silently. The wind carried faint drums, a rhythm that seemed to measure intrusion, patience, or intent. All who entered the fjord felt the weight of unseen eyes, a presence older than memory itself. Legends spoke of the fjord as a corridor between worlds, where the living and dead brushed together, where time could twist. Sailors noted clocks running fast or slow, instruments registering phenomena only briefly. Hunters vanished for hours, only to reappear as if nothing had happened. Some said the nightwing shadows guided the worthy and punished the reckless. Shadows moving with intention, figures gliding across water and rock with impossible fluidity. Light bent strangely, reflecting off surfaces in ways that defied physics. Folk tales intertwined with these factual anomalies, creating a consistent narrative. One that warned against arrogance, against trespass, against underestimating the fjord. During storms, the fjord seemed most alive. Trees bent violently, yet no wind blew. Mist thickened to a solid wall, swallowing sound and sight. The water roiled unnaturally, forming whirlpools where charts showed none. Sailors described shapes rising from the depths, silhouetted against lightning, only to vanish instantly. Echoes of chants, drums, and voices emerged from nowhere. Some whispered that the spirits of drowned Vikings enforced their law, testing courage, assessing intent, rewarding discipline and punishing hubris. The line between natural and supernatural blurred, leaving even officers uncertain of what was real. Stories of vanished vessels were common, entire ships disappearing mid-fjord. Survivors' accounts often contradicted reason. Men spoke of sudden fogs, currents that pulled with intelligence, lights beneath waves that followed or led them. Shadows flitted along cliffs like watchers. Some recalled figures stepping lightly on water, moving faster than humanly possible. The fjord itself became a character, an entity with motives, patience, and power. Each new patrol added to the growing tapestry of tales, blending historical fact with folkloric interpretation, a narrative alive and evolving. Villagers described encountering the nightwing shadows directly, sudden cold descending without warning, eyes glowing in mist, whispers urging them to turn back. Hunters reported tools disappearing, ropes uncoiling, arrows misplaced. Animals behaved strangely. Eagles circled in unnatural patterns. Deer froze mid-step. Wolves vanished and returned in locations impossible. People believed the fjord punished disrespect or carelessness, rewarded awareness and caution. These warnings carried weight for sailors and soldiers alike. Tales reinforced vigilance, melding survival and superstition. Ancient inscriptions and stone markers hinted at long-forgotten rituals. Symbols carved into cliffs, eroded by centuries, suggesting ceremonial significance. Fishermen spoke of offerings left by predecessors, bread coins or tools to appease spirits. Some claimed these offerings disappeared overnight. Others said their placement altered subtly. The fjord enforced an unseen order. Observers began to see these markers as guides, warnings, and a framework for understanding the anomalous. A subtle protocol emerged: follow patterns, respect boundaries, or face consequences. Seafarers' journals described auditory hallucinations that persisted across crews, whispers forming coherent phrases sometimes in Old Norse, distant footsteps echoing in alignment with patrols. The wind carrying sounds that contradicted direction. Some claimed to hear their own names repeated in distorted tones. Instruments occasionally picked up static or rhythmic pulses during these occurrences. The combination of sensory anomaly and folklore reinforced belief in guardians. Even the most skeptical acknowledged the consistency of reports. Experience and legend intertwined, creating a narrative impossible to ignore. Glowing figures were reported moving beneath fog and water simultaneously. Sailors saw lights tracing paths along channels then disappearing. Shadows reflected along cliff faces in impossible angles. Some claimed these were spirits leading or warning. Others suggested illusions caused by refraction. Each patrol added further accounts, creating a dense record where folklore validated the tangible. Lights, sounds, and shapes formed a complex system of communication, understood intuitively rather than consciously. Lessons learned became instinct, survival, and myth. Night operations heightened the sense of interaction between crew and fjord. Footsteps heard but unseen, reflections moving counter to movement, compasses spinning sonar, returning echoes in rhythm with visual anomalies. Crew spoke quietly of invisible guides, of lights that nudged vessels away from hazards. Even mundane observations, drifting fog, shifting currents, were imbued with significance. The fjord operated as a test, a teacher, a story in which each intruder became a character. Fact and folklore merged seamlessly, creating an experience beyond pure observation. Patrol logs contained repeated accounts of guarded areas, small coves, sunken wrecks, cliffside caves. Vessels entering these zones experienced simultaneous equipment failure. Lights beneath water pulsed. Shadows rose and fell atop cliffs. Sailors' perceptions stretched thin. The folklore of guardians once dismissed became a lens for interpreting anomalies. Observations previously thought coincidental gained context. The fjord's history, human and supernatural, intertwined, shaping decisions, behaviors, and survival strategies. Crew recorded each detail meticulously, reinforcing the dual reality of fact and legend. Incidents of temporal and spatial dislocation persisted. Crew reported moments of disorientation, compasses failing, instruments lagging. Objects rearranged subtly on deck, shapes seen where none should be. Some survivors recalled glimpses of other patrols that could not exist simultaneously. Folklore spoke of spirits moving between worlds. Observations aligned with these tales, creating a coherent, if inexplicable, framework. The fjord enforced rules invisible to ordinary logic, each patrol confirming the persistence of unseen guardians. Myth became operational knowledge. Legend became survival protocol. Finally, all these accounts together formed a tapestry of fact and folklore. Ships, instruments, lights, shadows, and whispers interweaving with centuries-old tales. Observations validated legends. Legends explained anomalies. The fjord existed simultaneously as geography and entity, observer and judge. Each patrol, each sailor, each artifact contributed to its living narrative. The Nightwing shadows endured across generations, testing, teaching, and shaping those who dared enter. Every recorded anomaly became part of the fjord's story, a story older than any human conflict, patient, eternal, and inexorably present. The anomalies of U-601's patrols began to resonate beyond a single vessel. Reports from nearby fjords hinted at similar occurrences, as if the waters themselves were interconnected. Lights appeared in patterns that mirrored those observed weeks before. Instruments failed at predictable intervals regardless of vessel or crew. Survivors spoke of voices echoing across distances, not from the fjord they patrolled, but from channels far removed. The fjord seemed to communicate, testing boundaries, marking presence, observing reactions. Local legends reinforced these accounts, whispers of guardians who monitored all who dared traverse the waters. Warning signs etched into memory repeated across decades. Patterns became apparent in both historical and contemporary records. Ships lost to fog or misdirected currents matched descriptions of shadowed vessels and spectral lights. Survivors recalled moments where time felt distorted. Minutes stretched into hours. Currents seemed to move intentionally. Objects on deck shifted inexplicably. Instruments recorded anomalies at the exact coordinates where folklore indicated hidden dangers. Analysts began connecting fact with legend, mapping both tangible hazards and unexplainable phenomena. The fjord existed as both physical space and narrative space, simultaneously theater and participant. Accounts from neighboring patrols added layers of corroboration. Lights moving beneath water, shadows on cliffs, whispers in dead air. Observers documented shapes rising and disappearing, currents subtly redirecting vessels. Repeated observations over multiple months suggested the fjord was not random. The anomalies followed patterns that could be studied, predicted, and respected. Yet explanation remained elusive. Natural forces could not account for every variable. Human perception was tested constantly. The line between training and instinct blurred. Survival demanded both rigor and reverence. Villagers' oral histories now intertwined with naval logs. Hunters recalled similar events decades prior. Lights moving along cliffs, shapes gliding silently over water, names spoken on the wind, paths disappearing then reappearing, tools rearranged overnight, echoes of drums and chants in dead silence. Each story aligned curiously with the locations reported by U-601's crew. Legends became a framework for interpreting anomalies. Observations reinforced myth, contextualized fact. The fjord's memory reached across generations, a living bridge between past and present. Even natural phenomena began to feel purposeful. Fog forming precisely in channels, ice blocking paths selectively, currents shifting to guide or impede, waves curling unnaturally around hulls, shadows stretching impossibly long, lights flickering in rhythm with other events, instruments recording inconsistencies that were repeated patrol after patrol. Crew began adapting behavior to accommodate both science and superstition. Navigation became negotiation. Observation became ritual. The fjord's pattern revealed itself as both hazard and teacher. Historical records added dimension to the bridge between fact and legend. Early 20th century shipwrecks mirrored U-601's anomalous encounters. Fishermen described lights beneath water moving as if alive. Hunters wrote of voices calling names from the cliffs. Some events occurred in exact locations where U-601 later reported anomalies. Patterns spanning decades hinted at persistent forces, not entirely explained by geography, weather, or human error. Folklore provided context, connecting these events across time. Each layer of history confirmed the strange, corroborating what modern instruments could not fully explain. The psychological toll became part of the bridge connecting observation and legend. Crew experienced disorientation, fatigue, and heightened senses. Instruments failed precisely during moments of peak anomaly. Shadows moved in synchronization with auditory phenomena. Lights pulsed in patterns corresponding to object movement. Survivors recalled being guided or misled subtly. The fjord seemed to read intentions, testing judgment, patience, and composure. Patterns were reinforced across multiple patrols. Fact, perception, and folklore converged, producing a narrative that demanded both respect and caution. Artifacts recovered from the fjord reinforced the connection across time. Submerged wreckage mirrored contemporary patterns, objects relocated or rearranged mysteriously. Tools or equipment left by previous crews reappearing in altered positions. Historical charts overlapped with anomalies documented by modern observers. Folklore interpreted these anomalies as purposeful, guarding judging or warning intruders. Patterns persisted through decades, connecting generations. Each observation reinforced the fjord's continuity, bridging natural human and supernatural dimensions. Even wildlife contributed to this persistent bridge. Birds hovering over precise channels, wolves avoiding certain passes, fish leaping in patterns inconsistent with currents, creatures behaving in ways that suggested awareness of patrols. Observers interpreted these behaviors through both empirical and legendary lenses, survival and myth intertwined, reinforcing the consistency of the fjord's memory. Every sighting became a lesson, every sound a signal. The landscape and its denizens acted as a system, teaching, testing, and recording the actions of intruders. Local folklore elaborated the bridge through stories of guardians enforcing order. Nightwing shadows, spirits of drowned warriors, or sentinels of ancient rites. Patrols that respected tradition reported fewer anomalies. Those that ignored caution suffered equipment, failure, disorientation, or psychological stress. Offerings left at key locations sometimes disappeared, subtly guiding behavior. Names whispered on the wind. Instructions conveyed through sound, light, or shadow. Each patrol became a chapter in the larger narrative, connecting human action, anomaly, and legend. Repeated anomalies suggested a meta-pattern. Currents, fog, shadows, and lights forming a coherent system, instruments registering effects at precise times. Observers noting coincidental echoes of ancient folklore. The fjord appeared to respond to human presence, assessing skill, composure, and caution. Even natural hazards aligned with legend, reinforcing the bridge between empirical observation and mythic understanding. Tactical decisions evolved, combining logic, pattern recognition, and respect for the unknown. The bridge between fact layer and folklore. Layer solidified, creating a coherent narrative across time. As winter deepened, the bridge became more apparent. Events occurring in one location mirrored occurrences in another. Lights beneath water shadows, on cliffs, anomalous currents. Names called in the wind, artifacts, displaced paths appearing where none existed. Each patrol contributed new data to this evolving pattern. Historians, officers, and villagers began connecting these threads. The fjord acted as a central node, linking decades of reports, stories, and anomalies. Observation, legend, and survival intertwined seamlessly, creating a dynamic system both terrifying and instructive. Finally, the bridge established continuity across space-time and perception. Fact layer confirmed by instrument observation and artifact. Folklore. Layer providing meaning, warning, and context. U-601's patrols were no longer isolated. The fjord's memory reached across decades, connecting human experience. Lessons of respect, vigilance, and humility endured. Each anomaly, every observation, every story became part of the continuum. The fjord's guardians, seen, unseen, or imagined, formed a bridge between reality and legend. Past and present converged, and all who entered became part of the enduring narrative. The night deepened, and the fjord seemed to breathe. A living, sentient presence pressing against the hull of U-601. Mist thickened to an almost tangible wall, swallowing the cliffs, the deck, and every shadow. Instruments flickered violently, failing and recovering in irregular pulses. Lights beneath the waves appeared, then vanished, moving with intelligence, tracing paths that no natural current could create. Crew held their breath, eyes darting, muscles tensed. Every sound, creaking metal, distant splash, whisper of wind felt amplified. The boundaries of reality narrowed. Uncertainty sharpened into terror. A sudden tremor ran through the ship, the hull groaning as if under unseen pressure. Shadows moved on cliffs above, rising and falling, forming impossible shapes. Crew called names, but responses came only from the wind. Lights pulsed beneath the water, synchronizing with moments of eerie silence. Every attempt at rational explanation failed. Time stretched, elongated by fear. Minutes became hours, every second filled with anticipation. The fjord was no longer merely terrain. It was predator, observer, judge, and teacher. The captain shouted orders, voice breaking. The crew scrambled to follow, but instruments failed. Sonar blipped, returning echoes from non-existent objects. Currents pushed the vessel against expectations. Waves rose unnaturally, curling as if alive. Shapes appeared in the mist, fleeting, humanoid yet distorted. Hands reaching from water shadows along cliffs, forms gliding above. Every crew member felt the weight of being watched. The air thick with intent. The fjord tested patience, courage, and skill. Failure was silently recorded. Sudden flashes illuminated the fjord. Lightning, no one, something else. Lights glimmering beneath the waves. Reflections dancing across ice, metal, and water in impossible ways. Figures moved atop cliffs in perfect synchrony with movements below. Crew froze, hearts pounding, unable to look away. Instruments recorded anomalies in rhythm with visual phenomena. The wind carried low chants, indistinct, ancient. The sense of being measured, assessed, and judged was palpable. Time, space, and perception bent under the fjord's influence. Fear became a tool shaping every movement. A scream cut through the mist, not from the crew, but somewhere beyond the fog. A sound impossible to locate. Panic spread. Men moved instinctively, guided by fear and training. Shadows stretched unnaturally. Hands rising from cliffs. Figures gliding across water. Lights pulsed rhythmically, synchronized with sonar anomalies. Objects on deck shifted as if touched by invisible hands. Every element conspired to disorient and challenge. Survival required obedience to intuition and respect for the unseen. The fjord dictated terms, the rules invisible, yet undeniable. An officer recorded in the logbook, "We are no longer observers. We are participants in something older than memory." Every patrol since had contributed to the pattern. Now we were part of the narrative. Lights beneath water coalesced into shapes resembling vessels. Shadows atop cliffs moved independently of any known force. Mist obscured, revealed, and then twisted perception. Crew experienced time dilation. Minutes stretched to eternity. Steps felt heavier. Breaths caught. The fjord orchestrated every sensory impression, guiding, punishing, and testing. Voices arose from the mist, distinct yet impossible. Calling names, issuing commands, chanting syllables from a language long dead. Crew recognized fragments, Old Norse, warnings, instructions, threats. Instruments failed in correspondence with these occurrences. Objects displaced on deck. Some vanished, some reappeared. Patterns formed across deck, hull, and water, coordinated with light, shadow, and sound. The Nightwing shadows, guardians of the fjord, moved as one with the elements, each observation layered over the previous, forming a crescendo of tension. Currents shifted violently. The ship rocked unexpectedly. The deck slick with ice and spray. Shapes rose beneath the waves, luminous, vast, and fluid. Figures glided above, mirrored below. Crew clung to rails, trembling, frozen, yet compelled to observe. Every second stretched, every heartbeat amplified. Mist closed in, forming tunnels and corridors impossible to navigate. The fjord became both labyrinth and predator, forcing decisions, testing courage, measuring endurance. The boundary between natural and supernatural collapsed. A blinding light illuminated the water, revealing a formation, a shape large enough to dwarf the vessel, luminous and shifting, moving with intent. Sonar echoed in impossible patterns. The crew gasped, fear and awe intertwined. Instruments screamed interference. Compasses spun. Every instrument became unreliable. The fjord had revealed itself, partially, a glimpse of its power, its sentience. the guardians enforcing law older than human memory. Every sailor understood they were not alone. Suddenly a ripple cascaded through the fjord. Water rose and fell against logic. Lights flashed in sequence. Shadows atop cliffs mirrored the water. Crew felt pressure in the chest, a psychic weight pressing through the fog. Time dilated further. Whispers became coherent warnings. Movement became messages. The fjord orchestrated a spectacle of sound, light, shadow, and perception. Each element precise, deliberate, terrifying. Survival was no longer about skill, but alignment with forces unseen. An officer attempted to mark positions on the chart. Impossible. Channels shifted. Currents changed mid-calculation. Mist swallowed instruments. Reflections warped reality. Crew shouted, but sound failed to carry consistently. Shapes moved in perfect counterpoint with light below. The fjord tested comprehension, intelligence, instinct. Every action measured. Every anomaly fit a pattern, a bridge between ancient guardians and contemporary observers. History and legend converged, documenting a climax in living memory. The vessel approached a narrow pass. Cliffs seemed to bend inward. Mist thickened. Water roiled as if alive. Lights coalesced into figures moving above and below simultaneously. Crew realized the fjord was actively guiding, obstructing, revealing, challenging. Panic, awe, reverence, and calculation collided. Instruments flared, then failed entirely. Every man's senses stretched to breaking point. The night-wing shadows were tangible. The fjord itself a conscious adversary. Every detail of navigation and observation became a test of mind and nerve. As the climax reached its peak, the fjord seemed to exhale. Currents stabilized briefly. Shadows receded. Lights vanished. Mist thinned. Crew gasped exhausted. Hearts racing. Understanding only partial. The fjord had asserted dominance, taught respect, enforced rules. Lessons older than any man's lifetime. The anomaly remained unexplained, yet patterns persisted. Legends validated by experience. Fact and folklore coalesced. Crew emerged, changed, humbled, awed. The climax left no doubt this fjord was alive, patient, eternal, and watching. The fjord fell silent, yet the silence was heavy, thick with the memory of every shadow, every light, every whisper recorded by U-601's crew. The waters shimmered faintly under the moonlight, calm yet deceptive. Currents that had shifted violently hours before now moved with eerie stillness. Instruments returned to normal, but their readings felt incomplete. Crew stood in quiet awe, sensing that the fjord's lesson had not ended. The shapes, the lights, the shadows they had observed, they had judged, and they remained, unseen, patient, eternal. Every logbook entry, every survivor's testimony, every artifact recovered now formed a tapestry of fact and legend. The fjord's memory extended beyond human perception, stretching backward through centuries of sailors, hunters, and fishermen. The night-wing shadows persisted as both warning and guide. Every patrol, every observation, every fear recorded became part of its enduring narrative. Even as the crew left its waters, the fjord remained alive in their minds, shaping their dreams, influencing their memories, altering their perception of reality. Villagers and historians alike recognized patterns now. Lights, currents, and whispers recurring in the same locations. Cliffs reflecting shadows that should not exist. Paths disappearing only to reappear. Tools and artifacts shifting as if moved by unseen hands. Oral histories interwoven with naval logs. Fact reinforcing folklore. Folklore explaining fact. The fjord operated on a scale beyond measurement, beyond comprehension. It had taught respect, fear, and humility, a curriculum older than war itself. The human eye could no longer discern the boundaries of natural and supernatural. Observers realized that perception itself was malleable, that the fjord could manipulate sight, sound, time, and intuition. Lights beneath the water pulsed with deliberate rhythm. Shadows on cliffs stretched and twisted. Whispers called names and issued warnings. Instruments failed in synchrony. Every anomaly was a lesson, every misstep a consequence. Survival required acknowledgement of forces both tangible and invisible. The lessons endured long after the ship departed. Patterns recognized by one crew persisted in others. Tales of the fjord entered folklore, then returned to fact as new patrols documented similar events. The fjord became a living archive, storing memories, enforcing rules, testing courage. Each vessel, each navigator, each observer added a chapter, creating a continuous record of human interaction with something beyond comprehension. The Nightwing shadows, whether spirit guardian or manifestation of perception, persisted, silent, eternal, and unyielding. Even in the quiet after the climax, the fjord remained an entity. Currents whispered along hidden channels. Mist lingered unnaturally over cliffs. Reflections flickered as if alive. Crew felt a lingering pressure, a sense of observation, continuing unseen. Instruments, now functional, hinted at residual anomalies. The fjord's judgment was impartial, patient, and thorough. Human arrogance or curiosity was measured carefully. Every choice, every reaction recorded, unseen yet undeniable. Stories both historical and contemporary merged. Sailors, villagers, hunters, all participants in the fjord's enduring narrative. Legends that once seemed fanciful now aligned with recorded events. Fact and folklore entwined seamlessly, creating a landscape where reality and myth coexisted. Lessons learned became instinct. Respect became protocol. Observation became survival. The fjord had forged a bridge between generations, a continuum of memory and warning. The fjord remained a teacher, a sentinel, an enigma. Its waters carried knowledge of every vessel lost, every patrol tested, every shadow seen. Lights and whispers persisted in stories, and perhaps in the water itself. The fjord's guardians continued their watch, impartial, eternal. Each sailor left its embrace changed, marked, aware. Their memories tethered to an entity older than human comprehension. Fear and awe now intertwined in every recollection. Yet mysteries remained, questions unanswered, objects unexplained, shadows untraced, whispers still carried across channels at night. The fjord's archives were incomplete, intentionally. Lessons preserved but full understanding denied. Every visitor left with more questions than answers. The Nightwing shadows remained patient, observing the horizon, waiting for the next intruder, the next curious mind, the next chapter to unfold. As dawn broke over the fjord, light spilled across cliffs and water, revealing normalcy at first glance. Yet the memories of the night lingered. Currents had shifted subtly, ice had melted in unusual patterns, faint reflections danced in the still waters. Crew left cautiously, aware that the fjord's influence extended far beyond visibility. Every patrol, every observation, every whispered warning etched into collective memory. Fact and folklore converged, shaping history and myth. Simultaneously, the fjord's story continued, written in waves, fog, cliffs, and memory. Every shadow, every pulse of light, every anomaly remained part of a continuum. Sailors carried it home. Historians recorded it. Legends passed orally. The Nightwing shadows endured, patient, eternal, neither cruel nor kind, impartial, measuring human courage and respect, every lesson complete yet incomplete, waiting, observing, ready to test again. And so the fjord remained, a corridor between worlds, between past and present, between fact and legend. Its waters concealed truths, revealed anomalies, and preserved memory. The night-wing shadows waited silently, their presence both real and imagined. The fjord had taught its lesson, yet left the ultimate mystery unresolved. For every ship that returned, every patrol that survived, a question remained. What else lay beneath the surface? Watching, waiting, enduring, eternal. You have just witnessed another record from classified chronicles, a story where history, observation, and legend intertwine, where courage, fear, and the unknown meet. The fjord's memory continues, and so do the shadows. If you wish to uncover more hidden chronicles, more untold encounters, subscribe and step cautiously, for the waters are patient, and they are always watching.